Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is a Thursday, August the 19th, 2021. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about Afghanistan, and then I'm going to talk about two magazines. The two magazines right over here are Harper's and Mindfulness. Harper's and Mindfulness. So I'm going to open up with a little bit about the situation in Afghanistan, which is deteriorating by the second. Briefly, let me simply say that, in general, this is definitely Biden's fault. This disastrous evacuation is the worst planned, worst anticipated event I have ever seen. This makes Saigon look like a cakewalk. My wife made a comment the other day as we were watching the airport scenes. He said, I haven't seen a war in a while. I haven't seen a war in a while. And that's what we're watching on TV now. We used to watch the Vietnam War on TV. And in the beginning of Bush's, or George Bush's Sr.'s original wars, we watched that on TV a little bit. We watched some of the opening of the wars. But for the last 10, 12, 14 years, we've seen less and less and less war on TV. We hardly see it at all. We don't find the embedded journalist on the news every night. We got Richard Engels is about the only guy we see over there on a regular basis. Anyway, going back to the original story I was going to talk about. About 4 nights ago, on Rachael's show, they talked about the corruption that was been going on in Afghanistan, and literally, they called it fantastically corrupt corruption. Fantastically corrupt corruption. $1 billion a year for 20 years. 1B with a billion. $1 billion a year for 20 years. The country is still poverty-stricken. They built a few roads here and there, but most of the money went to the corrupt elites in the country who took massive amounts of money and built hugely expensive homes. Most of the money, I would bet you, is out of the country by now. As we left tons of weaponry there. It just doesn't make any sense to me. As part of that show where they talked about the corruption going on that particular show, they were also talking about the Beltway corruption. The amount of people in the Beltway, and by that they meant within about a 30-mile radius of Washington, D.C., which is where all your lobbyists live. And these lobbyists and the arms manufacturers made a fortune over these last 20 years. The people that didn't make a fortune were the poor people in Afghanistan, who are still the poor people in Afghanistan. But what stopped me on this whole thing, the really big thing that got me going, was I'm watching Rachael, I think it was the night before last, and, well, as Thomas Friedman said, it's not the day after you have to worry about, it's the day after that you have to worry about. And the day after, we find that we are installing Abdul Ghani Baradar, and he's the Taliban de facto leader right now. Now, this guy was in jail a few years ago. Trump negotiated with Pakistan to get him out of jail. Once they got him out of jail, Pompeo then went over and met with him. And that's how this deal was put together. So this guy has been in jail in Pakistan. Bush wouldn't negotiate with the Taliban. Obama wouldn't negotiate with the Taliban. Donald Trump comes in and he starts to negotiate with the de facto head of the Taliban who's in jail. He gets him out of jail. Pompeo meets with him, and now he's installed as the new leader in Afghanistan. Well, it just stopped me at that point. And it was, well, this is sort of, let me go back to a little more. That's about how it makes me feel. I feel like my head's exploding, you know. This was an art piece in Juxtaposed magazine that we just looked at. But that's the way I feel. I feel like my head's just like exploding with bad information about things that are going on. So this story that he installed him, this had me, is he Is the leader of Afghanistan now a radical Islamic? He says he's not. Now the people in the streets, the fighters who are in the street, who are used to fighting in the countryside, who are used to not having a terribly strong chain of command, and who are used to basically imposing this Islamic law on people, who are used to sort of breaking into houses, telling people that you're going to put me up for the night, telling women what they're going to do, things like this. He is saying that he is not a radical Islamist. However, what we're seeing on the street right now is not indicative of that. Now, whether he needs to get this together and that's going to change, we don't know. Who knows? Is he a radical Islamic, or is he just a radical authoritarian leader, much like Putin or Modi or Duterte or any of these guys all around the planet that the Donald seems to be friendly with? And that's got me more concerned than anything about what's going on right now. Well, the safety of the people there is extremely upsetting. And on Rachel's show last night, she did the whole story about getting Zach out of Afghanistan. This story has been going on not only for months, but for years. So this particular individual, and let me show you, I got a picture of him here. Well, there's him and his family. That's him and his family, and we won't make any suspense out of this whole thing. This is at the end of the story. Is let's put it over there. Maybe that's better. Yeah, didn't hit that. The end of the story is he gets out, but this has been going on for years, trying to get this guy out. Now, this guy, he's been a very brave, loyal person who has worked with our forces, and a Major Tom Schumann is the guy who originally was working with him. He was willing to go to the most dangerous places. He literally ran across fields with mines in them. He attacked Taliban soldiers. This guy has been like an Army Marine guy. He literally has been like a Marine. And when he first started, he was like I think he was 18 or 19 years old. Well, now he's almost 30 years old, and now we have a family and 4 kids. And while he was working for the American forces, part of his job for over a year and a half was with a company. He was a private contractor hired by this company. Well, they set up these procedures to get people like him out. So he goes to fill out the paperwork, and then he's got to have, he needs a letter from this company. Well, the company doesn't exist anymore. They were around 5 years ago, but they're probably one of Donald's son's brothers' companies. God knows what it is. Anyway, the company is not there. He can't get a letter from them. Therefore, his paperwork gets stopped. Well, this has been happening one step after another, and the guy's never in a position where he can get the paperwork, get the heck out, get to the airport, and get on the plane. So this Major General has been spending day after day after day, really full time, on the phone with people in Washington, people in Afghanistan, and this particular guy continuously doing everything he can to get him out. At one point, he's got pictures of the guy at the fence, which he's showing to another Marine who's supposed to be there to meet him, and the Marine doesn't show up. They have him another location. Somebody's supposed to go get him, and they don't go get him. One after another, there are people supposed to get this guy out, and it keeps not happening until the very last minute. Eventually, he winds up, and let's change the picture. We'll take that one down, and let's just, the general, the Major General, no, that's not it, is, let me get, where is he? Over, there he is with Rachel. Yeah, there he is, and that's Major Thomas Schumann, and he was on Rachel's show the other night, and they're giving the story. They're going through the story, and as she says all the time to people, well, did I get it right, you know? He says, yeah, you got it right. You basically got the essence of the whole story right, and this is what I appreciate about watching Rachel Maddow. Can you imagine somebody asking somebody on Fox News if they got the story right? more cases than not, they didn't get the story right. And if they didn't get the story right, and they tried to tell a person how the story was right, they would get yelled at and insulted. I've seen that happen on Fox News before. So Rachel always goes through this with people. Did I get the story right? Have I got, am I missing any points? You want to add to it? So she always gets their comments. And this guy said, no, you got the essence of the whole thing. And she's talking about what happened with this particular guy, Zach. And she said, well, what can we do to improve the system? And the answer from the from the major is common sense. And he talks about common sense for the next 10 minutes. You wind up in a lot of these bureaucratic situations and the bureaucracy takes over. And when the bureaucracy takes over, if you're in the middle of the bureaucracy and somebody's trying to get something and you don't want to give it to them, then you quote the rules in the bureaucracy. If you want to give it to them, then you bypass the rules and do it. It happens all the time. So people use the structure sometimes just to stop things. And some people get so used to doing this that that's their MO. So at the very last minute, the story was going on, and she was explaining how many times he had been stopped and how many times he didn't get out, and one thing after another. And at the end of the story, I was sitting there, and I was anticipating that he was going to be, that Zach was not going to get out, but it turns out he does get out. And that's when I literally started to cry watching Rachel, and she then started to cry, and that's her crying on television. I went back and I grabbed the picture. You don't see Rachel crying on television too much. She started doing one of these at the end of the story. I felt exactly the same way. The horror that this guy was going through. And Zach is representative of about probably 1,000 more people there who are having a significant trouble getting out. And what it took was a boatload or a carload, about a half a dozen Marines. If there's 1,000 people over there and it took six Marines to get this one guy out, you figure out the numbers. If there's 15,000 people in Vietnam, if there's 15,000 people in Afghanistan right now, which the numbers may be that high, between nonprofits that are there, between the NGOs that are there, between women's organizations that are there. Remember, in the last 20 years now, women are going to school, women are participating in athletic activities, women are ready to go to Olympics. Boom, Taliban's there, forget about it. A woman was dragged out of her car today and beaten, taking a cab to go to work. You can't turn on the tube right now without watching some horror taking place over there. Personally, I think we ought to send 50,000 troops right back tomorrow. We ought to remobilize the army, send the bloody army over there, get these people out. If there's 1,000 people there, and it takes 6 Marines to get each one of them out, then send 6,000 Marines. If there's 15,000 people, you do the math. Whatever it is, we need to get these people out. We have been fighting there for 20 bloody years in a war that we never should have gone into in the first place. And who's made out? I'll tell you, Halliburton didn't do badly on this deal. We can go through the list. We don't have to. Halliburton was enough, just to say that one. They went from being on the edge of doing business, but with Dick Cheney in there and the war getting started up, they've done just fine. Okay, so that was sort of my little riff about what's going on in Afghanistan right now. And the fact that Pompeo met with this guy and they put this deal together. Now, I know that Joe Biden, and the only thing that Joe Biden said that really I felt positive about was when he said, the buck stops here and I'm responsible. Well, okay. Donald Trump would never say he was responsible for anything. In fact, he said he wasn't responsible for things a number of times. Joe Biden took responsibility. That felt positive. The fact that he took responsibility for this mess, making it a little bit worse because his message is absolutely disastrous. I personally think we really need to get these cargo planes and send these troops back in the country, occupy the country, get these people out, and then everybody leaves. And take half the women with you. This is just terrible what's going on over there. So Joe was, like I've said this a number of times, Joe Biden was probably the only one that could have beaten Trump. As we look at things today, we can see that That, in fact, is a fact. He is the only one that could have beaten Trump, and now we got the situation. He's doing good with the vaccine. He's doing good with the infrastructure. He's doing good with a lot of things. This he is not doing good with, and this is a problem. So come on, Joe, get your act together. Send the rest of the goddamn army in there and get these people out. Whatever it takes, get them out. We don't leave people behind. I'm about getting emotional about this thing myself. It's got me terribly, terribly upset. The women were standing in the street there. There were 3 women. I mean, these are really brave people. The women are standing there in Kabul talking about how they want to work, get education, and political participation. Meanwhile, some Taliban guy is ready to hit them with a club. There was a woman on CNN the other night, Clarissa Ward. Clarissa Ward. Now, we've seen Richard Engels in war zones for the last, 10, 15 years. The guy is anywhere there's a bomb dropping, there's Richard Engels. Well, CNN has got their female version of Richard Engels, and it's Clarissa Ward. She's the chief international correspondent. I've seen her 3 times this week. She's standing there the other day. She's got a little crew with her. She's dressed in black over here, and she's got a thing to cover her face up with it. And she takes the covering off her face. And she's talking to this Taliban guy who's got a gun hanging over his shoulder and one of these chuck cord whips in his hand, one of these 2 metal things with a string in between, and he's swinging it. And she's pointing and she said, well, what's that? And he said, you cover your face up. And she said, what's that little thing you're dangling there? Which I thought was very cute. Oh, you cover your... He's telling her to cover her face. She's questioning him, what's this little thing dangling in your hand there? And he's not... Finally, he picks up the gun and he threatens her, at which point the whole crew starts to move out. This woman has got chutzpah, let me tell you. She's standing there with this guy with a gun in his hand, and she's questioning him and basically almost laughing at the little whip he's got in his hand. He's going to go around whipping people. Clarissa Ward, a shout out to you. When Zach and his family finally got picked up by the Marines, they were they got in the car. They're with the Marines. And they said, "Oh, finally we feel safe now. We're with the Marines." Now, I've been in the service. I am not anti-military. I'm not anti a lot of things. I am anti-war. I think it's the stupidest thing we've got going for ourselves as a human race. Having said that, we have situations where people are doing things and we need to keep ourselves safe. With that in mind, it's why we have armies. Now, I have never been, like I said, a terribly big proponent of the armed forces, but I've been there myself. And the fact that they felt safe once they had Marines with them. I have an in-law at home who was deeply involved. I think I've talked about him before, and he's to this day has a lot of mental problems because of his involvement overseas for about 20 years. He's retired Army Special Forces. These guys are brave. They're out there putting their life on the line, and once these people were with the Marines, they felt safe. So I'll send enough Marines over there to get everybody out. I said I was going to leave it there, and I finally will. All right. Let's change gears for a second here and go to a lighter topic. So I had these 2 magazines I bought this week, and it was sort of funny. I folded one into the other, and I had them sort of, well, I'll show you how I had them. I had them folded into each other, the 2 magazines together, right? So I picked the magazine up, and I look at the title over here, and it says, the article I'm reading, and it says, bad news. So I got bad news on the front half, and then I open it up to my magazine I have shoved inside, and I've got mindfulness, a peaceful mind, peaceful mind. That's sort of a bit emblematic about where I'm at. On one hand, I'm sitting here with current news magazines. On the other hand, I'm sitting here with meditation magazines. So I've got mindfulness here. I've got Shambhala Sun. I've got Tricycle. I get Harper's. I get the ACLU magazine. I had Airbus, as we talked about the other day. So I get a lot of magazines in the house, and I'm liking to start to sort of give a little bit of a review for the magazines. Maybe and get you interested in go getting a copy yourself. So this was Harper's, and for the month, and this is the month of September, so September 2021. Right, September 2021. And it says disinformation, how we get fake news wrong. It opened with an article entitled Easy Chair, and it's written by Hari Okunzar. And it starts off, a lot of the issue is about 9/11, and there's a half a dozen pictures in here from the Twin Towers in 9/11. I'm not going to get into my own particular viewpoint on how 9/11 happened, or whether it was an inside job, or how the Twin Towers came down, or how Building 7 could never have come down, or any of that. Let's just stay with the blunt, generally accepted viewpoint here. The point of the article was this. It was really well written, and it was the opening article, Easy Chair. And it starts off, he's in his West Hollywood hotel, and he gets a phone call to turn on the TV to see what's happening, like many of us did that morning. So he turns on the TV and he sees the plane going into the already embedded in the tower, and then he's watching it and he sees the second plane come into the tower, and he's like, oh my God, you know, he's all upset about this whole thing, and he sees his own connection to it. He's Afghani. Now we don't know he's Afghani until later in the story here as I'm reading it. He gets in his car and he takes off and he goes out to Death Valley. He likes the desert. He's an Afghani and he likes the desert, and he feels peaceful and calm in the desert. So he's out in the desert and he gets there and he's sitting there and he's just trying to sort of chill out, and these cops had seen him drive by. So suddenly these two cops pull up in back of his parked car. They get out of their car. They start to approach him. As they're approaching him, he puts his hands on the wheel, opens up the window, and he's got his hands there. He's opened up the window. They're coming out and they start to draw their guns. Well, officer, can I help you, please? He says to them, and they hear his very thick British accent, at which point they immediately put their guns back. As soon as they hear that he doesn't sound like a Middle Easterner, but he sounds like a Brit, they put the guns immediately away. And this was the interesting aspect of the story, how he's treated over time as a dark-skinned, bearded Afghan person. About a year later, or less than that, we have the British bomber with the material in his the heels of his shoe. Well, suddenly, the British accent doesn't do him any good anymore. So he's traveling between New York and Paris and London and California, and he's trying to get all around the place, and he can't get around for a long period of time there because there were no planes. But once he gets moving, he's back in these other locations, and at one point he's about to get in the plane and they signal him out because he's Afghani. So they signal him out, they search the death out of him, everything is fine. They finally let him back on the plane, and as he's getting back on the plane, everybody on the plane is looking at him like, who's this guy? Why'd they take him out? What's wrong with him? So he's just feeling this really intense pressure against him. The story ends with, everybody has such memories of days hallowed by an aura of fear. Everyone has their own version of the phone ringing in your motel room when you heard about the event happening. The voice telling me to turn on the TV. So he's describing how everybody has a different take on what happened, but the different feelings that were going on through it. It's a really well-written story about what happened on that day for him, and a good opening for the magazine. They have a lot of interesting things in Harper's. They've got poems in here, they've got little short stories, they've got news bits, they've got little trails of all sorts of information. And this thing, I don't know if you can see this, I'll pick it up a little higher. You see it says Life Alert. What we're looking at is a brain-dead teenager. Oh, did I say that? Oh, maybe it's a brain-dead adult. And what this is, Life Alert, it's a robotic eye which you can hang around your head where your third eye is, so it sees where you're walking. So if you happen to be walking along carrying your cell phone in your hand, and you're on your cell phone looking at it while you're walking along, if you have a third eye here, it'll see that things are in front of you and warn you to get out of the way and don't bump into things. Whoa. This is one of the things that's going on in large cities where large numbers of people walk on the streets, especially at lunchtime and things like this. Go to New York on Fifth Avenue. Once people start to get back out in the streets again, the cell phones are in the hand, they're bumping into each other. A bunch of idiots. The main story that was in here was the bad news story. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It opens up with, in the beginning, there was ABC, NBC, and CBS. And that was good. And he's describing how the news, how everybody got the same news. Well, this story here has got to do with big disinformation has found an energetic support from the highest echelons of American political center. The magazine is talking about advertising and how advertising over the years has basically sold a lot of disinformation to people and how it's accepted and how this whole trend has sort of moved into a political news disinformation kind of world. If you get a chance, pick it up. It's a really good article, worthwhile reading. The last one I'm going to mention in here is The Third Force. The Third Force, it's called. And it's on stupidity and transcendence. Stupidity was a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. The story is opening in 1943. And this priest and a clergyman in France, he's questioned by the Vichy government that he might be hiding Jews. So therefore he's told to report to the police station. And before he entered the police station, he thought the world was secure, and there were basically two modalities: God and the devil, the good and the bad. From then on, he knew that there was a third force seeking hegemony over this world: stupidity. Stupidity was the third force beyond good and evil. Stupidity doesn't mean unintelligent or even uninformed. Stupidity is a loss of reality, as he says. He's quoting various different philosophers over time here where he comes up with this thing. Idiocy loves company more than misery does. It's possible that some individuals embrace stupidity because they're afraid of being alone. He goes on here, he sort of, toward the end of it, he's talking about faith might look like stupidity. He's talking about religious faith. Faith might look like stupidity because it seeks a kind of transcendence. But engaging with reality rather than denying it, okay, the sentence is this: at first glance, faith might look like stupidity because it too seeks a kind of transcendence, but through engaging with reality rather than denying it. So what they're saying is that religious faith engages with the real world and doesn't try to get you to do things that are transcendent to that. I'm not sure about that. I don't. They're quoting Kierkegaard, and I think Kierkegaard's off the wall here on this. This is the end of it. But stupid they could never be. Many of the protesters were young, bound to do a thing or two. We're talking about George Floyd and the young people who were protesting the Black Lives Matter, and how the young people weren't that wrong. The young people were out there and they were being, we might say they were ill-advised, but not stupid. And that was the big part of the article was this, that they were not stupid, that the young kids that are out there doing this are really smart, doing what ought to be done. Disinformed, How We Get Fake News Wrong. Harper's, if you get a chance, check it out. Really good issue. We're at 28 minutes. I don't like to go over 30. Mindfulness Magazine. Here we got a positive note here. Mindfulness Magazine. I like this magazine, Your Guide to a Peaceful Mind. This magazine started off small, then it got bigger, and then it got small, then it got mid-size. I don't know why they've changed the size 4 times. I don't think they're very mindful of what they're doing here. But the issue, I've got about a dozen issues of Mindful Magazine. I really like the magazine because it takes a very non-sectarian approach to the whole mindfulness concept. So you don't get too much Buddha mentioned in this magazine. A little bit, but not much. It's more a practical way to approach things. I'm going to read this one thing. We're all familiar with the advice. Just take a deep breath when your emotions run high. Science has confirmed that slow, deep breathing calms us by reducing heart rate and activating the parasympathetic, which is the calming nervous system. The results, your body relaxes and your mind gets quiet. Breathing through your nose may enhance the effect. So breathing helps to calm you down. I used to work at a register in a health food store, and the fellow before me put the sign up, breathe, on the register. So you'd get confronted by angry people or people complaining, blah, 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 and you would get your ire up. Breathe. Take a breath. Breathe through your nose. Slow breath. Slow in. When you do this kind of thing, you're not going to get blissed out, but it's going to calm you down. The other interesting comment was anxiety meets mindfulness. And in this article, meditation isn't about blissing out. It's about getting to know your anxiety, which helps to release you from its grip. So I sit every day for about an hour. My wife and I sit every day for about an hour. And you're not sitting there necessarily getting blissed out. You're not necessarily on another cloud. You're right here in the world, and you're feeling everything that's going on right inside your body. You are aware of yourself, and that's the good news. I put these two pictures up. One is a little yoga lady from, this was Shambhala Sun magazine, and this was a portrait that a lady friend did. That's supposed to be me, and my lady friend died recently, Ziva Longley. And the reason I was going to put the picture up there, I was going to connect this to some stories in Peaceful Mind, and how Ziva was a really big proponent of helping getting kids out into nature. And I should do more of a story on it, but it's already over 30 minutes, so I'll do it at another time. Let me just say that getting out into nature helps to calm you down, helps make for a more peaceful mind. If you got a chance, go take a walk in the woods. Peace, patience, persistence, and we'll see you as soon as we can. Thanks for joining. Bye now.